Amazing engineer laughs as 12-year-old boy uncovers hidden mistake that saves the project. Jake squinted at the blueprints, lines, and numbers blurring together under the dim glow of his desk lamp. The words of Mr. Thompson echoed in his mind, "This isn't a job for kids. Let the professionals handle it." Rejection stung like a wasp, tighter around his heart, a reminder of how small he felt among the towering adults in their hastily arranged meetings. Dreams of engineering, of following his grandfather's footsteps and becoming something meaningful, seemed to shrink with each dismissive glance. Would anyone ever take him seriously? His fingers twitched with urgency, coated in grease from his father's garage projects. It was meant to be his sanctuary, a place where grand ideas could take root, but it had started to feel more like a cage. Today, however, he felt something grow within him, a flicker of determination against the suffocating pressure surrounding him. The playground project was meant to be his chance to shine, the spark of hope in a sea of adult responsibilities, yet every step felt heavy and uncertain, taunting his aspirations that he tossed and turned the idea in his mind, what if he could really help? But the voice of self-doubt crawled back in like a shadow. What if he failed spectacularly? What if he embarrassed himself in front of everyone? The tangible fear of exposure strangled his thoughts. Part of him wanted desperately to hide in the garage's familiar chaos and never emerge. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a nervous energy thundering through him, Jake returned to the drawings late one night, fingers tracing the lines of the playground's design with hesitance. The rancid smell of old oil plucked at his mind as the weight of doubt collided with a fierce determination. Hours slipped by as he wrestled with variables, his forehead creased in concentration. The words of his mother, "You can do anything if you work hard enough," replayed like a mantra. But perspiration trickled down his spine, whispering uncertainties that made him second-guess every calculation. Out of nowhere, like an unexpected storm, an error revealed itself. His heart jolted as he stared, breath catching in his throat. It was glaring, impossible to ignore. How could this have been missed? The danger of failing flooded back, an almost tangible weight settling heavily on his small frame. He glanced at the clock. A meeting was set for tomorrow. The adults would scuttle in, flash their degrees and experience, while he remained the overlooked child in the background. Would they laugh again? Jake's mind spiraled. Could he summon the courage to voice his findings? Or would he remain silent, allowing this moment to slip away, lost amidst the rush, drowning in doubt? As he sat frozen in thought, gripping his pencil tightly with clammy hands, he sensed that everything hinged on this decision. The implication of it was monumental: risk rejection or save the project. Panic surged, weighing heavily on his chest as he counted the fleeting seconds left before dawn. Would he step into the light, or let the shadows of uncertainty swallow him whole? The walls of the garage felt like they were closing in, the heavy air suffocating as the night blurred into a new day full of possibility or perhaps ruin. The sun broke through the horizon, casting a pale light across Jake's cluttered desk. Each ray felt like a clock ticking down, reminding him that time was slipping away, and he was still tangled in indecision. He could either confront the overwhelming discomfort of sharing his findings or remain a ghost in the room, silently observing the grown-ups parade their expertise as if it were armor against his youthful insight. With a burst of adrenaline, Jake shot up from his chair. His mind raced uncontrollably, weaving through every possible reaction the adults might display. What if they listened? What if they dismissed him? The scenario shifted from excitement to fear and back again, each thought swirling like a tempest. He pulled on an old sweatshirt as a form of armor against the chill of self-doubt and stepped outside into the brisk morning air. The sounds of the neighborhood stirred to life around him. Children's laughter floated from the nearby playground, a stark contrast to the weight in his chest. He yearned for that carefree spirit, the pure confidence that comes naturally when you're 12, unaware of commercial obligations and adult expectations. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with cool air, and felt his resolve strengthen. He was determined not to go unnoticed any longer. Arriving at the community center where the meeting would take place, he noticed a small crowd gathered outside. The adults shared eager conversations, unaware of the boy observing from the edges. Jake inhaled sharply, a wave of self-consciousness crashing over him. Would they allow him to speak, or had he already wandered too far in their world? The meeting room loomed large, its door propped open. Voices echoed, a mix of voices confidently discussing project details, filled with technical jargon. Jake's palms grew slick against the paper in his hands, a printout of the blueprint with the mistake carefully highlighted. He moved closer, feeling an internal battle churning. His heart raced as he looked at the faces of those who had humiliated him before. Suddenly, a moment of clarity broke through like a beam of light cutting through foggy misgivings. He had seen something they hadn't. Their degrees didn't guarantee infallibility. A tremor of excitement surged in him. Maybe this was his moment, but he still hesitated. Should he challenge the status quo? Could he really bring the attention back to himself? With a determination he had never known, Jake stepped inside, trying to exude a confidence he wasn't sure he felt. His heart thudded in his ears, but he pressed on. As he approached a table filled with engineers, he was met with raised eyebrows. They seemed not so much curious as amused. Excuse me, he stammered but pushed through the anxiety clawing at his throat. I found something wrong with the playground design. The laughter from one of the adults sent shockwaves through him, but he pressed on, raising the printout above his head. It's important. Look here. A pause fell over the group, the initially dismissive expressions beginning to morph into curious attentiveness. As Jake presented his findings, he began to feel the veil of self-doubt lift, revealing a growing sensation that he belonged, that this was his moment to shine, regardless of the laughter that had momentarily clouded his vision. Yet, as murmurs of surprise and intrigue washed over him, one engineer stepped forward. His gaze pierced through Jake, a look that could either encourage or crush. An ambitious claim for a kid, don't you think? He challenged. What makes you so sure? Jake's heart raced anew, not with fear, but with resolute determination. This was not just a challenge regarding the project, it felt deeply personal, a pivotal moment that could define his trajectory in the engineering world. Would he rise to the occasion or crumble under the pressure? The weight of the moment coiled within him, and as he opened his mouth to respond, the room fell silent, waiting for the answer that could change everything. Jake stood at the crossroads of his fears and ambitions, the weight of the engineer's gaze hanging heavy in the air. He could feel the electricity of anticipation ripple through the room, the silence stretched taut. It was an invitation and a challenge, a chance to assert his identity, to stand tall against the tide of doubt, not only his own but that of the engineers previously encased in their adult certainty. That he took a moment to collect himself, desperately searching for the words that would transform his findings from mere paper into an undeniable truth. What could he say that would earn him their respect instead of their ridicule? I based my calculations on the original design specifications, he stuttered initially but then firmed his stance. This playground layout is unsafe because the swings are set too close to the sandbox. There's a risk for injuries. I measured the distances, and he glanced down at his notes, mind racing. Suddenly, recalling a project from school where he had built a model playground, inspiration struck. I can show you if you'd like. I made a model using these measurements, and it clearly demonstrates the oversight. A ripple of murmurs began to circulate, fluctuating between skepticism and a flicker of intrigue. Recognizing that doubt had shifted toward consideration, Jake felt encouraged. This was not just a matter of proving himself, it was about ensuring safety and fostering a better environment for the children who would use the playground. The lead engineer, still eyeing him critically, sighed deeply and folded his arms, weighing his response. All right then, let us see this model of yours. Displaying confidence with facts can change how we view your contributions. Jake took a step forward, an unyielding pulse of energy driving him. The room shifted from amusement to uncertainty, and for the first time, he sensed the balance had began to tilt in his favor. "I brought it with me. If you just give me 5 minutes, I'll demonstrate my point," he responded, his words woven with resolve that surprised even him. That he rushed home to collect his model after school, and now it sat neatly in a box in his backpack. As he fumbled through the contents, fingers trembling slightly, he felt the gravitational pull of validation begin to anchor him. The adult's interest grew palpable, and as Jake opened the box, he could feel another layer of his resolve unfolding. A twisted sense of triumph began to replace the self-doubt that had consumed him for so long. With each piece, he carefully reconstructed the model playground, calling on his memory of what he had learned and the insights he had developed through careful observation. As he finished setting up the miniature playground, he glanced up to see the engineers observing, their expressions shifting from doubt to intrigue. Jake pointed out the distances, gesturing between the swings and the sandbox, his voice rising with burgeoning enthusiasm and conviction. "Each measurement follows standard safety guidelines. If we don't adjust this layout, accidents will happen. We need to be responsible." The lead engineer's expression softened into something akin to respect, perhaps even admiration. Questions pressed through the crowd. Would they acknowledge him or simply dismiss his youthful enthusiasm? Then came the unexpected. Another engineer spoke up, "He might be onto something. We could bring in the safety experts to validate his concerns." A flicker of realization illuminated Jake's mind. He had made them consider a unique viewpoint, one they hadn't anticipated. Their acceptance of his argument opened up a door he hadn't yet dared to dream existed. Would this challenge reshape his identity not just as a curious kid but as a legitimate contributor? As the adults conferred, debating the merits of Jake's model and calculations, he felt a swell of possibility unfold inside him. Being heard was exhilarating, defending his idea elevated him beyond the shadows he had lived in for so long. Jake was on the cusp of something transformative, but the weight of external success loomed. This validation could come with its own trials, and his journey was just beginning. What if this is just the start? He thought, stepping back slightly to view the gathering storm of possibilities laid before him. But before he could fully explore them, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his heart plunge. There would be a vote on the playground's redesign, and he might not be as included in their decision as he hoped. Would he be sidelined yet again, or was he finally breaking through? As they turned their attention back to him, Jake understood that the moment of truth was arriving. But would it prove to be a victory or yet another lesson in resilience? Jake's heart raced as he registered the weight of their attention. The room felt both exhilarating and suffocating, a chaotic blend of ambition and vulnerability swirling around him. The murmurs of the engineers faded into a buzzing cloud as he contemplated the impending vote that lay just beyond the horizon of his newfound confidence. Stay focused, he reminded himself, pushing down the swell of anxiety. This wasn't merely about proving his competence. This was a test of his resolve, an exploration of who he could become in the face of adversity. Thoughts whirled through his mind, interspersed with flashes of self-doubt and the nagging question of whether his voice would truly matter. But as he stood there, a conviction began to solidify within him. The engineers were chatting, their expressions no longer mocking, but contemplative. What would it mean for a kid like me to genuinely contribute? He pondered, suddenly aware of the profound implications. His model represented not just an argument against a poor design, but a bridge to a growing identity. The vote, he thought, realization dawning. His heart sank at the possibility of being sidelined. If they're just going to dismiss my input after I've bared my soul. It was an unsettling realization, but Jake quickly pushed it aside. He'd come too far to let fear cloud his determination. Now that he stepped forward, glancing at the lead engineer. Can we consider the safety implications as a priority? If we make decisions based on our initial ideas alone, it could hurt the children we're meant to protect. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, and Jake gripped his model tighter. He could feel the eyes of the engineers shifting back to him, the tentative respect he sensed earlier growing a little stronger. At that moment, it was as though he had become part of their team, his value beyond age becoming palpable. Their conversations began to incorporate his suggestions, discussing not only the distances but safety protocols they had overlooked. Though he was a child among them, his perspective began to influence the established parameters for the redesign. However, as the debate intensified, it became evident that not all engineers were convinced. A gruff voice rose above the others, contradicting Jake's findings. "We've been in this game a long time, kid. We don't need junior engineers telling us how to do our jobs." The word struck Jake hard, a sharp jab that reignited the flames of self-doubt he had been painstakingly quelling. He felt the room close in around him as laughter threatened to re-emerge, clawing at his hard-won confidence. He fought against the urge to shrink back, to retreat into silence as he had done so many times before. This was not just a moment to present facts, it was a call to assert his newfound voice despite dissent. That he took a breath, grounding himself in the conviction that had taken shape in his chest. "I may be young, but this is about children's safety. My youth doesn't invalidate the truth of what I discovered," he managed, his voice steady but passionate. Another engineer, sensing the vulnerability in Jake's challenge, stepped in. "Let us not forget where we come from. Innovation often comes from fresh eyes. We should at least listen to his perspective." Jake felt the shift, these threads of support weaving through the uncertainty like a lifeline. Still, the tension remained. They were voting soon, and the lingering negativity lingered like a shield around Jake's ambitions. Would he be able to navigate through the skepticism, or would his fears swallow him whole once more? As the engineers began to coalesce around the idea of reconsidering their approach, Jake felt the pulse of change flickering just within reach. He yearned for these professionals to see not only his model but him a budding engineer who had a voice worth hearing. The niggling thought returned. What if this moment became a pivotal turning point for his identity? But at that instant, the lead engineer announced the impending vote, and Jake's resolve once again faced the uncertain wind of doubt. The stakes were higher than ever, and as the tension ricocheted around the room, one thought pressed on his mind with relentless fervor. Was this journey of self-discovery about to culminate in recognition, or would he instead be faced with the crushing silence of unrecognized potential? The next moments would reveal it all, and Jake braced himself for whatever lay ahead. Jake's breath caught in his throat as the lead engineer raised a hand for silence. The room dimmed, all focus drawn to the unfolding moment. Every eye flicked between him and the lead engineer, who was poised to speak. Time stretched, taunted him with uncertainty, and Jake felt as if he were on the precipice of destiny, or perhaps, disaster. "Let us vote," the lead engineer said, urgency lacing his tone. "Those in favor of re-evaluating the previous design based on Jake's concerns, raise your hands." The eyes that had once glinted with skepticism now seemed to shadow the sparks of potential. Jake's heart thudded as several hands tentatively raised. Then, a few more followed, and his stomach churned in disbelief. Could it be? He wondered, hope pooling in his chest. But then the eyes of the dissenting engineer, the one who had mocked him, locked onto Jake's. "This isn't just a game of trust, you know. Do we really want to base our decisions on the whims of someone who hasn't even taken an engineering class?" The engine of confidence that had begun to hum within Jake spluttered. In one piercing moment, the sneer in that engineer's gaze ignited a simmering tide of doubt, a feeling he had wrestled with but thought he had begun to conquer. Jake could feel the weight of his youth pressing down on him again, threatening to crush his budding self-assurance. Stay the course, he told himself, clenching his fists around his model. No shortcuts on this journey. He focused on the shifting tides of thought coursing through the assembly and grabbed for the lifeline of logic. "What I'm suggesting is backed by evidence," he said, his voice trembling slightly but resolute. "If we ignore safety, we put lives at risk." A low murmur erupted, shifting in tone as representatives from different corners began exchanging skeptical glances, yet the compassion in some eyes harbored remnants of solidarity. Jake saw the engineers wrestling with their perceptions. He had sparked a realization about vulnerability, not his own, but theirs. For the first time, he saw seasoned professionals grappling with their own inhibitions. That he sensed an opportunity surge within him, an understanding that to confront grown-ups wasn't purely about mechanics, it was about understanding their fears as well. As he gazed around the room, he noticed one engineer, a woman in her 50s with silver streaking her jet-black hair, her brow furrowed in contemplation. Experience is vital, yet innovation often comes from the unexpected, she said, breaking the hesitation. We shouldn't dismiss new perspectives, not when we're dealing with lives. Her point stirred the room, shifting the balance of argument. It was as if Jake's vulnerability had coaxed forth her strength, and for the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility manifesting into a tenable force. If he could just hold on a little longer, push his conviction further, perhaps he could turn the tide. I understand your concerns about inexperience, Jake ventured, eyes burning with a newfound intensity. But rushing our decisions could jeopardize everything we've built. Isn't our ultimate goal to protect? The tension in the room twisted into a sort of energy, fueling Jake's resolve. One engineer nodded thoughtfully, then another. The ripple built slowly, but it crescendoed as hesitant hands began to join the raised ones in favor of him. The unity radiated through his body like lightning, awakening a fierce resolve he had never felt before. The vote was palpable, humming with the fear of change and anticipation. Jake's heart raced. He needed to remind himself this was more than just a numbers game. It was about crafting a future his, and the engineers who were facing the reality of evolving their long-held beliefs. The lead engineer's pen scratched the surface of a document, and at that moment, as he tallied the votes, the vision of a brighter future stirred within Jake. Would this moment anchor his transformation or become a mere footnote in someone else's narrative? The reality of both options loomed large. As Jake anxiously awaited the result, he felt transcendent, a clash of boyhood and burgeoning professionalism. No matter how it turned out, this journey was shaping him in profound ways. It was about standing tall amidst the tempest. Decision time. The vote is in. The lead engineer's voice sliced through the charged atmosphere, promising resolution yet pregnant with tension, knotting Jake's stomach anew. All eyes were on the lead engineer, and each second felt suspended, holding the potential for either triumph or despair. The path before him had converged into this singular moment, and with the faith he nurtured between the cracks of doubt, Jake vowed to himself, regardless of the outcome, he would emerge transformed. But would he be able to withstand the chaos that truly defined his reality as they stood on the brink of his pivotal moment? The lead engineer's eyes flickered down to his document, tension coiling in the air like a spring ready to snap. The collective breaths of the team felt synchronized, each person suspended in their own realm of expectation and apprehension, trapped in a moment that felt like both eternity and a fleeting second. 6 votes in favor, and 3 against, the lead engineer announced, the lines on his face softening slightly. We will reevaluate the previous design. The words cascaded over Jake, warm yet staggering, pivotal yet daunting. The murmur of the room shifted from contentious disbelief to cautious optimism, a phenomenon he scarcely understood. Yet, mingled with his relief was a creeping anxiety. While the immediate battle felt won, Jake realized the war was far from over. This vote served not just as a validation, it was a doorway cracking open just enough to allow a sliver of light. As the other engineers began discussing logistics, Jake's mind shifted into hyperdrive. Now what? He wondered, feeling exposed. He had sparked a change, but the next steps could very well cement his place among these experts or completely unravel him. His position was precarious. He understood that one misstep could shatter the delicate thread of credibility he had begun to weave. The noise of the room faded into the background as his thoughts spiraled further. A lingering voice of doubt purred in the recesses of his mind, sneering at his qualifications, at his youth. He clenched his jaw, steeling himself. Confronting his insecurities head-on had certainly stirred the crowd. Perhaps it was time to acknowledge the reality underpinning this journey, one rooted in learning and exploration. Jake, can you walk us through your revised proposal? The woman with silver streaks suddenly asked, her tone both directive and inviting. The eyes around the room turned toward him again, their scrutiny sharper this time, as if demanding conclusive evidence of his merit. He felt his stomach lurch, appreciation or fear played tug-of-war within him. Of course, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Pointing to the 3D model he had created, he laid bare his thought process, every rationale laced with passion and urgency. With each explanation, he observed the way some engineers leaned forward, intrigued, while others struggled to hide their doubt. Jake recognized that part of his mission was to not just present facts but to dismantle the invisibility of the discrepancies he had found not just in design, but in their approach to unconventional voices. As he spoke, a flicker of realization sparked within him. He was not merely presenting a solution. He was sharing his viewpoint, his reasoning rooted in genuine concern for their safety and collective achievement. This was a partnership, a collaboration of sorts, despite the existing hierarchies. Each nod, each thoughtful glance made him feel emboldened, just enough to face the next question, the inevitable confrontation that awaited him. His mind raced ahead, anticipating the pushback. "And how do you plan to address the cost implications?" came a voice, belonging to the same engineer who had mocked him earlier. This voice was sharper now, as though wishing to dislodge the confidence he had carefully nurtured. "I plan to optimize the materials we currently have. By rearranging the structural elements, we can significantly reduce waste, which would offset costs while ensuring safety." As he spoke, he felt an odd thrill wash over him. Was he challenging not just their ideas but their assumptions too? Jake sensed the shifting ground beneath him, not as an engineer fighting against entrenched views, but as a young man championing innovation and methodical reasoning. Another engineer interjected, intrigued yet wary. "But isn't that risky? Have you accounted for the long-term impacts?" The questions were part of the test, each countering the convictions Jake had just begun to solidify. Facing this critical scrutiny, he was gripped with renewed determination. Risk is inherent to innovation, but calculated risk can lead to monumental progress. He didn't fully register the nods of approval around him. His focus was razor-sharp, only the tightening of tensions and the intrigue of new possibilities filling his thoughts. There was yet more to share. Each response expanded his burgeoning confidence, nourishing the roots he had begun to plant. The meeting seemed to stretch into marathon territory, exhausting yet exhilarating, building up to a crescendo of collaborative excitement. Several engineers began to brainstorm alongside Jake, tossing ideas into the ether, invigorating him. The room, for the first time, felt like a laboratory of innovation rather than a court of judgment. Just as the atmosphere shifted toward constructive dialogue, the lead engineer announced an intermission. Jake's heart sank momentarily. He had hoped to ride the momentum of openness without interruption. But then he spotted something, a flicker of skepticism in the dissenting engineer's eyes. And in that moment, Jake realized a new challenge loomed. If his ideas were to take root, he must confront misconceptions head-on. The time would come for him to face the very core of opposition, to challenge not just ideas but the beliefs that defined them. The transformation within him felt palpable, and as he gathered his thoughts, a singular focus emerged. He needed to prepare himself for the confrontation he had yet to face. Would he rise to the occasion, or would that moment define him as simply a fleeting voice in the crowd? Jake paced the break room, the fluorescent lights flickering above him like unsure lanterns. The chatter of his colleagues faded into a blurred hum. His mind was steeped in the choices ahead. The intermission felt eternal, but it also bought him precious moments to strategize. This was not merely about the next meeting or even the project. It was about redefining his own professional narrative, transforming from an outsider to the very creator of solutions. In that cramped space, he rummaged through his thoughts, pinpointing the core of the dissent that lurked in the corners of the room. It wasn't just about technical capabilities, it was a question of trust. Could he persuade his peers to trust a newer engineer with ideas they had not yet considered? His fingers tightened around a steaming cup of coffee, the heat grounding him against the tide of anxiety washing over him. Jake, the silver-streaked woman's voice startled him. She had appeared at the threshold of the break room, her expression unreadable but curious. "I wanted to talk to you. I admire your approach. But are you prepared for what's coming?" Her words were like a life buoy amidst turbulent waters. I'm getting there," he stammered, uncertain but needing to keep this candid. "I just have to find a way to address the other engineer's concerns properly. Be ready to defend your ideas, but also to engage with his perspective," she advised, stepping closer. "Sometimes it helps to acknowledge the concerns openly before presenting your solution." Jake nodded, absorbing her advice. Her experience was evident, she navigated through complexities with a grace he wanted to emulate. With each successive exchange, it felt as though he was peeling layers off his self-doubt, inching closer to becoming the engineer he aspired to be. As he returned to the conference room, the sensation of eyes, now more watchful than skeptical, ignited a spark of determination within him. He could feel the subtle shift his colleagues were contemplating, not only his proposal but his evolving role among them. He took a deep breath and made his way to the front. When the meeting resumed, he felt fortified. The dissenting engineer folded his arms, wearing an expression that mirrored skepticism tempered by curiosity. "You've said there's a calculated risk, but what will you do when those calculations lead us astray?" Jake leaned forward slightly, activating the unspoken connection he had established with the room. "I appreciate that. Acknowledging potential failure is part of the process. The revisions I propose not only aim to reduce costs but are designed with contingencies to adapt to unforeseen circumstances." His heartbeat quickened as he articulated his thoughts into a cohesive response, synthesizing his proposals with their perceived challenges that he presented scenarios. What if the materials didn't hold? What was the fallback? Layering his ideas with safeguards started to bridge their gap of understanding. He watched the skepticism in the dissenting engineer's eyes soften, curiosity replacing the coldness. As they continued fleshing out details, Jake felt his confidence rising. A new part of him was coming alive. With every question, he ceased to feel defensive and instead embraced a collaborative spirit. The engineers were no longer just a jury assessing his worth, they were partners in the inventive process. The conversation evolved, shifting from hesitant evaluations to vibrant discussions, peppered with laughter and shared insights. Jake felt transformational energy coursing through the room, a palpable shift in focus from fear of failures to exploration of possibilities. But then, amid the excitement and engagement, the lead engineer made an unexpected inquiry. "What if we have to present to the higher-ups? Have you thought about how to frame your message to ensure they see the value of your changes?" The air suddenly shifted again, and doubt pierced through Jake's growing armor of confidence. Would he have the ability to distill complex technical ideas into a narrative compelling enough for executives? Jake's resolve fluttered, even a single misstep now felt ominous and pivotal. Was he truly ready for that? He grasped at the threads of his earlier conversations with the silver-streaked woman, visualizing how he could transform their technical dialogue into a narrative filled with assurance. Before he could respond, another colleague chimed in, "I think it's essential that you share not just the facts but the human element behind them. What makes this project meaningful beyond numbers?" The challenge loomed, and Jake was left at a crossroads, wondering if he could encapsulate both the analytical and the inspirational in his next presentation. Could he summon the skill to captivate without losing the technological essence that had just begun to gain traction among his peers? The moment of truth was approaching. Jake felt the weight of the imminent presentation settle on his shoulders. This was a defining leap, and he knew he had to seize the opportunity. Feeling a blend of anticipation and trepidation electrify his senses, he nodded thoughtfully, and now he had to prepare not just for the confrontation he had anticipated but for a transformation that could redefine his entire career path. Jake sat at his cluttered desk, surrounded by a cacophony of diagrams and project notes. The temperature in the room dipped slightly, unnoticed by the engineers engrossed in their conversations about materials and methodologies. For Jake, the looming presentation to the higher-ups had transformed from a mere task into an emotional Everest. He could feel the pressure mounting as he considered the challenge set before him. The question of how to communicate the human element intertwined with his technical concepts reverberated in his mind. It wasn't just about numbers, it was about narratives. As he glanced at the notes he had painstakingly crafted, he recognized their inadequacy. Jake's heart raced as he opened a new document, an empty canvas waiting for his thoughts to manifest. What were the stakes here? This was more than a simple project, it was his burgeoning identity as an engineer. The desire to be seen, to be acknowledged not just as a contributor but as an innovator, surged through him like an electric jolt. "Okay, focus," he muttered under his breath. He began recalling the moments that had sparked his enthusiasm and creativity during the project. There was the late-night brainstorming session where ideas flowed like a river, unimpeded. There were the small victories over technical setbacks, each one a stepping stone. These were the human elements that had infused his work with purpose that he started writing, his fingers flying over the keyboard as if unveiling a hidden part of himself. This narrative would cast his proposal not just as a series of technical adjustments, but as a story of collaboration, resilience, and foresight. Each revision proposed became not just a statistic or data point, but part of a larger story that spoke of shared struggles and triumphs. As he pieced together the outline, Jake's earlier doubt began to evaporate. Energy surged within him as he deftly wove the human element into the framework of his project. He envisioned presenting it not as a formality but as a compelling journey that highlighted the team's dedication, the risks they faced, and the innovative solutions they had crafted together. This is it, he thought, a chance to translate the technical into the tangible. With every sentence, he breathed life into the concepts that had felt stale and mechanical. Would it resonate? Would it inspire? He yearned for his colleagues and the executives to feel the passion that had fueled his efforts. Feeling a rush of adrenaline, he printed his draft. The crisp pages turned into tangible proof of his evolution from uncertainty to a nascent confidence. But a nagging feeling lingered. He knew he needed feedback from someone who could challenge him further. Making his way toward the break room once again, he sought out the silver-streaked woman. She had become a touchstone for his development, a mentor he hadn't realized he needed. "Can I run something by you? I need perspective," he asked, his voice steadying with each word. "Of course. I'm glad to see your enthusiasm," she replied, gesturing for him to join her at a small table tucked in the corner. As he shared his narrative, he could see her expression shift from cautious curiosity to engaged attentiveness. Jake finished, glancing at her expectantly. "What do you think? What you've crafted here is a good start, but you need to dig deeper. What emotional tangibles exist? When did the team rally together? What hardships did you collectively face? Make them feel the urgency of what you're discussing," she encouraged, a fire igniting in her own words. Jake nodded, absorbing her insights. There was still more to uncover about the human elements of his project. He was on the precipice of something transformative, but it depended on his ability to resonate emotionally with his audience. In the following days, Jake wrestled with his drafts, refining them with each word and interaction. He sought stories from teammates, capturing their experiences and weaving them into his presentation like threads in a fabric. The multidimensional approach began to take shape, invigorating his work. Then came the preparation for the presentation. As the day approached, he practiced relentlessly, standing in front of a mirror, rehearsing with the passionate conviction he aimed to embody. Yet, as he honed his voice and gestures, a thought gripped him: what if they missed the point? Could he, standing before seasoned executives, translate the excitement he'd ignited among his peers to a boardroom filled with critical eyes? His heart raced at the prospect, the thought rattling through his mind like a broken record. The moment loomed, and as he stood before the audience, the tension coiling within his chest, he wondered if he could truly pull this off. The stakes felt monumental. Was he prepared to face the scrutiny and challenge he craved? Jake took a deep breath, readying himself for the unknown, feeling his resolve coalesce around him like armor. It was time. Would he evolve into the visionary he aimed to be, or would doubt once again hold him hostage? Every moment counted as the presentation neared, and the prospect of failure loomed just as large as the chance for remarkable success. Jake stood at the front of the conference room, palms clammy against the edges of the podium. The air felt thick, the anticipation wrapping around him like a heavy shroud. 8 pairs of eyes were fixed on him, each carrying the weight of scrutiny and expectation. As he opened the presentation deck, an unexpected panic surged through him. The meticulously crafted narrative floated momentarily out of reach, as if swirling amidst the anxious atmosphere. He began with a shaky breath, recalling the urgency of the narratives woven from his teammates' experiences. He had set out to share not just the project details, but the heart behind it. Today, I want to talk about not just numbers, but a journey," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. To his relief, the intrigue rippled through the audience as he highlighted the late nights spent with colleagues, the moments of frustration, and the thrill of breakthroughs. He pulled in the stories of those who had collaborated closely with him, their voices rising alongside his to emphasize the collaborative spirit that had propelled the initiative forward. Jake spoke passionately. He was no longer merely a presenter. He was a storyteller, bridging technical jargon with relatable human experiences. The air in the room shifted. Distant expressions melted into nods of recognition. He then shifted to the pivotal challenges they had faced: the breakdown of a critical component that had initially derailed their timeline. But it wasn't just a setback, he stated, letting the words hang for a moment. It was a rallying point. A moment that unified us. While the deadlines loomed over us, we came together, brainstorming late into the night and leaning on each other as strengths. He glanced at the silver-streaked woman, his mentor, his compass. Her approving smile radiated encouragement, fueling his confidence. He pressed forward, embodying the spirit of resilience he had cultivated in the aftermath of adversity, but then came the moment he envisioned, outlining the innovative solution that emerged from the collective perspiration. Each piece of data and revision was underlined with the emotional stakes of his team's dedication. He had brought forth the raw energy each member contributed to the project. Yet, as he approached the conclusion, a knot of apprehension twisted his stomach. Would they grasp what he had conveyed? Would they see them not just as engineers, but as passionate architects of change? A hand went up, a senior executive with an inscrutable expression. "You've highlighted the passion, Jake, but I'm still struggling with the specifics. Can you explain how this will affect our projections moving forward? To pivot off passion, we require actionable outcomes." A bolt of anxiety shot through him, but he collected himself. It was a direct challenge. Stepping back into his technical persona, Jake answered thoroughly, detailing the projected impact of their revisions with clarity. As he spoke, numbers illuminated the screen, intertwined with the narrative he had crafted. The executive nodded, but then leaned forward. "Have you considered potential risks?" It hit him. The truth was, they had walked a fine line between success and failure. He realized, in that moment, that his journey hadn't just been about overcoming challenges, it was about confronting vulnerabilities. Something in Jake shifted as he began discussing potential pitfalls. He tapped into his innate understanding of both the technical and human elements, revealing the complexity of their decisions. The aftertaste of self-doubt began to recede. There was strength in vulnerability, and he touched on the importance of being candid about setbacks as much as triumphs. As he closed, exhaustion drenched him, yet an exhilarating sense of accomplishment throbbed in his chest. He had navigated the labyrinth of criticism, transforming it into an opportunity for growth. He had sparked a conversation that promised to linger, but just as he was wrapping up, a persistent thought gnawed at him. Had he truly illustrated the full significance of what they had achieved? The lingering doubt hollowed out his triumph. What if he hadn't articulated the full impact of their work? Would they understand the essence of their collaborative spirit? As he stepped away from the podium, he caught the eyes of his colleagues, their encouraging glances lifting him. But in the back of his mind, the persistent question echoed, had he done enough to articulate the innovation born from adversity? The meeting concluded, but Jake felt a flicker of determination. Whatever the outcome, he had taken significant strides in his journey toward self-discovery, toward being an innovative engineer. But a voice deep within whispered for clarity, an urge to ensure his message was fully delivered. The next step pressed upon him: how could he further engage his audience, solidifying what he had begun? The prospect of amplifying these emotions and connections churned within him, igniting a sense of urgency. Jake was ready for the next challenge, ready to hone his narrative into something irrefutably impactful. As he exited the room, a singular thought gripped him: he would revisit his approach and weave the necessity of authentic connection into every presentation. The moment of realization dawned: it was not just about communicating triumphs, but deeply sharing the fabric of every setback and success. And just as the adrenaline from the presentation ebbed, he realized he was standing on the edge of another challenge, one that demanded creativity and clarity, a conference where he would present not just his project, but the very essence of his evolved perspective. Would he seize this opportunity to turn his experiences into a revolutionary narrative? Jake strolled into the conference hall, the nerves from the previous presentation lingering but transformed into a current of excitement. He had survived the scrutiny of the executives and emerged not only intact but invigorated, ready to dig deeper into his newfound role as a contributing voice in engineering. Today wasn't just another presentation, it was a moment to solidify his identity as an innovator who could capture both the technical and human elements of design. Standing at the podium, he felt a rush of empowerment. Reflecting on his last presentation, he had learned that passion connected with others, and he was now determined to amplify that connection. He wanted to show the audience the heart behind the numbers, weaving a narrative that would resonate beyond the walls of this room. As he gazed out at the assembled executives, remembering the skeptical looks from the engineers weeks earlier, he thought of how far he had come. No longer shy, no longer the boy hiding in the shadows, Jake was an architect crafting a new reality for himself. Today, I'm not just presenting plans, I'm sharing a vision of what's possible when we embrace innovation, he began, his voice steady and loud enough to command attention. With each word, he infused life into his project, a playground designed not just for fun, but engineered with safety and accessibility at its core. Imagine a place where every child feels welcome, a playground engineered not just for entertainment, but for connection. It's not merely a structure, it's a community hub, a way to foster friendships and learning through play. The executives sat up straighter. They were no longer just uninterested stakeholders, they were potential supporters of a vision he had revealed through hard work and dedication. Jake detailed how, rather than delegating a problem to his peers alone, he had successfully opened a dialogue, inviting collaboration and cultivating shared ownership of the project. That he projected plans and highlights of feedback he had gathered from children themselves, moments he had captured during his visits to playgrounds, discussing what made them feel safe and inspired. By the end of his presentation, the smiling faces of the children had become the embodiment of everything he had aimed to achieve. This isn't just a project, he concluded. It's the manifestation of dreams, safety, and connection, rooted in the very experiences of the children who will use it. As the applause erupted in the conference hall, Jake felt an unexpected wave of warmth and recognition wash over him. This wasn't just praise for his presentation, it was validation of his journey. He had faced self-doubt, learned to advocate for his ideas, and transformed them into something compelling that others could rally around. The lead executive, nodding thoughtfully, began to speak. Jake, I appreciate your perspective. The way you've interplayed technical details with personal narratives offers an innovative approach we need to embrace moving forward. The words were like the closing chord in a symphony. Not only had Jake achieved competent recognition, but he had effectively transformed doubt into belief. Facing the audience with newfound confidence, he raised his fist quietly, feeling proud. I did it, he mused internally. I've shown them who I am and what I can contribute. Jake wasn't just an imaginative boy lost in a world of adults, he had anchored himself as an emerging leader in engineering. This was the moment his name would no longer be overlooked. Walking down from the podium, he was approached by the silver-streaked woman who had guided him through many doubts. That was impressive, Jake. You've really grown. Your willingness to take risks and communicate your insights has made a significant impact. Her words ignited a sense of pride within him, one that felt different. It was a quiet acknowledgement that who he had become would resonate well beyond this room. He envisioned future projects, pushing boundaries and bringing more voices into the conversation. Each step he had taken had led him to this pivotal moment, and he was ready for all that awaited. Jake's transformation wasn't just about proving ideas, it was about establishing his role and identity in an arena that had been intimidating but ultimately rewarding. He had conquered not only the fears within, but had proven that youth could harbor insight deserving of attention. As he breathed in the applause, it wasn't just a celebration of ideas, it was the recognition of the person he had become, an engineer holding the essence of creative resilience, paving the way for future challenges. He stepped into possibility, embracing the opportunities ahead, ready to leave his mark on the world. Now is the moment to support this journey. You need to subscribe now to the channel for more exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover transformations like Jake's. Comment below with your theories and reactions regarding this conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this uplifting journey. Don't wait even one more second, your support makes a difference.